then again. Yeah, while giving away tickets or like selling tickets for free, we asked you a couple of questions. One of them was on extreme programming practices. Pretty much a lot of good answers. You know them very. Turns out that hope even more. It's pretty. Anyways, before we will do the introduction.
So, hello, I'm a few words about why we are here today. We're here today because we recently have moved to a new office building. This is office, and so that's why the reason why we decided to make a DEVCLUB event in our new office. And so, a few words about Codeborne. We are a small company which does outsourcing most of the time, but also creates some its own projects or products. We currently have about 30 craftsmen, people, and we actually do use pair programming and so on and so on. All these techniques that you probably hate. Aggressive. We started actually in year 2010, and at that time we had only 10 craftsmen, and just it started. We are already 8 years on the market, and top of most successful IT companies in Estonia. That's a fact. So Agile does work. Proved. Just to name few, there are some of our clients that all of them are pretty happy. They can do their business thanks to people say to us that pair programming actually doesn't work. Developers will never want to use it. Developers hate to work in pairs. And what we actually have now, developers actually do use pair programming, do program in pairs. And we probably have a lot of questions about how it works. We are going to show it later today. And in the meanwhile, in the pause between speeches, you can go downstairs and watch our working room in the second floor, how our computers actually set up. The last, but not the least, maybe the thing that automatic tests lower when we need to write, when we need more time to write automatic tests.
What the hell says that?
Sorry?
What the hell says that? This is nonsense, everybody knows. It was dubious kind of thing, but
actually, really, a lot of people.
This was in 2010.
Okay.
It was a different time.
Actually, nowadays, also many people actually think that developers should not write automatic tests. Probably partially because of there is typical other testers, QA automation engineers who write tests. But it's really ineffective. But this is one topic. But what we have now, developers do write automated tests. Developers again are happy, and by the fact we deliver projects much faster than other companies. We actually had a lot of chances to compare, and it's a fact. So you are welcome to our office, and in the pause you are welcome to the another floor to see how we are actually working. Thank you. Who will make the first speech today?
Okay, welcome everyone. Let's see if we can get the thing going.
Yes, it does work. First of all, Welcome to Codeborne. I'm also one of the founders of Codeborne 10 years or more than 10 years ago. We started it together with Anton, who's here, and Aha and Thomas, who are not here today. But you're all very welcome, and at the break, look around and ask questions if you wish, and about how do we work, or how do people like it here. My today's talk is a relatively specific one, but just something that, an idea I got from a project that I'm working on recently, and some ideas on messaging that probably to just to put a different perspective, or just some different aspects of messaging that are usually not talked about, or that are overlooked. So what's this messaging that I'm talking about? So there are A and B are either two separate systems, parts of the same system, maybe even threads inside the same system, or something. They need to communicate with each other. They need to, A needs to pass a message. So usually by messaging, it is meant that in the two, so that when A needs to send the message, it doesn't need to know so much about B, but the broker takes care of the details of the messaging, and that's it. Why that is mostly about having an asynchronous solution, is when you have decoupling, or that the sender and receiver are more independent in doing their own stuff, and you can have they can have different uptimes. So perhaps you have but the receiver or consumer, how it's used, the term is used in messaging technology, is maybe only consuming messages at a specific time, or after some interval, whatever. But they don't need to care about each other. So this independence is important, and also scaling. You could have multiple message producers or senders, but maybe the messages can be processed so quickly that you only need one consumer, or vice versa, that you have so many messages that you need to scale the consumption of messages, have many consumers there. And this brings me to different consumption patterns, which is to many of you maybe common knowledge, but something that I wanted to point out, which is relevant, and say they mix things up, or they don't have a clear vision which one they're talking about, but two different consumption patterns are important. So let's look at them. I made some small quick show of them. So the gray thing with the A, B, and C is a queue that has some, the red ones are messages in the queue. And the question is about how the messages are consumed. This is all that the consumption patterns are about, how the messages are consumed. And the important part is that point-to-point messaging means that one message is sent to one point, basically, or received by one point. So when let's say one consumer consumes the message, takes it and uses it, and at the same time, while this one consumer is consuming it, the other one is actually free to take the other message and consume that one. And you could imagine that even if the message consumption takes a long time, then you could achieve quite high parallelism with this. The important part is that each message is consumed by one consumer, and let's say one finishes, then it can take the next one. So this is point-to-point, how it's called, like the most typical message consumption pattern. But there is another pattern which is called publish-subscribe, and the let's say the most obvious here is from the word publish, is that when you publish something, it goes to many. And the idea is here that if the messages are received, the same message is delivered to multiple, to all the consumers. So that is another important consumption pattern in some use cases. Usually this is used in events when the event is something happened, and there are the consumers might each be very different. One is consuming an event one way, the other one a different way. They might be doing a different thing, but they all get the same message. And this is a different pattern. This is when you want to multiply or have different behaviors on the events. I will not go into details of any specific messaging system, but the idea is that you can combine these patterns either on your own or with many messaging systems today help you do these combinations, that you have a queue, or sometimes when you're using publish subscribe, it's not called a queue but rather a topic. So you publish messages on a topic and then you listen to that topic. But the idea is still the same. Basically from the sending side, you actually don't care whether it's a publish subscribe pattern or a point-to-point pattern, because you just send a message. You say that this is the queue where I want to send. The terminology varies a bit between the implementations, but the idea is still the same. You just send the messages, and someone hopefully will consume them at some point. And now it's up to your consumers to sort out how they will be consumed. There is a number of message brokers, and the list on the left is the more fancy ones, or the modern ones if you wish, which are hype cycle and quite actively used. On the right are more commercial offerings, most of them much older, with IBM MQ probably the oldest, together with TIBCO. Actually, I think they are both very old solutions, but are still actively used today, and are still there is a lot of like the big databases like Oracle and also Microsoft. There is a lot of technology in there that people have sorted out various issues, so they are very reliable technologies. The list on the left, just where I got it from when I was just doing this, there is one blog that I stumbled upon. There are probably tons of resources on that, but this is just one that seemed interesting. A guy who has written about them, about the different aspects of each of those, and made some benchmarks also about the throughput there. And if you like, you can see there the throughput of each of those systems varies greatly, and there are different aspects of why that is, and I will come back to that in a moment. JMS, the ones of you who are using Java or in the Java JVM world, JMS is a relatively old standard, you could say now. It is, I think the S stands for specification, so it's a set of APIs that different messaging brokers can implement, so that it is a standard interface you use from Java to use that messaging broker. The idea is that if you're using a generic API, and if you want to move from one broker to another, you don't have to change the API there. My experience is that I worked with probably many of those, at least at some level, both on the left and right hand side, and the even though they might have the same JMS interface, many of them, the way you have to use them, or you still have to think about the implementation and the nuances why you have chosen or someone has chosen this implementation. So there isn't really much value in having a common set of APIs there. What JMS helped is that, especially in the Java world, but also it has, given the prevalence of that, it has moved outwards as well. It helped to kind of have more common language among developers about this, but it's not, there isn't like a very clear standard. But my point is, if you will use any of those and you have a choice between using its own API and JMS, then at least my advice is don't bother with JMS, use their own API, because you have a good reason of choosing one of those and then just use it to the max by using their API, because then you have an easier life and you don't have to worry about the fact that JMS, being a generic API, needs there are tricks inside the API implementation which need to be done to adapt to each system's nuances. So just ignore these and use the underlying system directly, which is much more efficient, and you will get much less surprises there. I think maybe the exception might be IBM MQ, which has their API is such an old one and cryptic one, so maybe a JMS might be easier. But even to get that running, you need to have like 10 or 20 different parameters configured correctly to get it running. So that's another story. So now to the throughput. How many of you have heard or even used NATS, or I don't know what's the correct pronunciation there? None. And okay, one. Very good. I would like to hear your ideas later on as well. But NATS is although it is a message broker-based system, it is very different and why it has such a high throughput. It is about durability. And the durability is about when you send a message to the message broker, whether that message is persisted somewhere on a disk or in a database or something before it's passed on to the consumers or not. And NATS is usually, there could be exceptions, but in its default configuration, it's an in-memory thing, which means that that allows it to have this extremely high throughput. So the numbers are 200,000 messages per second. So I don't know, there might be systems which need that kind of high throughputs, but probably most of you are in everyday life not concerned with these kind of systems. But there are situations where this is useful, and then the trade-off is made about durability. The durability is important, that when the message broker itself crashes, then the message is lost if it's only in memory. There are clustering solutions that try to come around that limitation, and Kafka, while it's there, this is Kafka usually is configured as a persistent with a durable store, but it has a strong clustering support, and that's probably why it's let's say the closest to an in-memory store that it can support this high throughput. And durability, this is why I had it here. Usually the types of applications that I have been writing, and probably that some messages sometimes, not very often, but sometimes get lost. And in many cases, the business, if you'd ask that from a business, they would say no. And there are, of course, trade-offs in there. And if you have a throughput requirements of having a 200,000 messages per second, then maybe you would start making some compromises there. But usually in a business scenario, the message rates are much lower, and so the business choice is usually there. We don't want data loss, so we want durability, so that if something is, let's say, saved to the queue, to something, then it gets processed. That it's not lost if there is some server failure or something. It must be processed, even if later it must be processed. So that is, I think, in many applications, that is a very important aspect. So let's look at one use case on that topic. If you have a business application, very usual case is this is point-to-point messaging. This is not public, or it could apply to publish-subscribe as well. But point-to-point messaging is you have to take a message from a queue. You have to process it somehow. Maybe do some calculations. Maybe fetch some data to enhance that information that you got from the message, whatever to do, and then save the results. Usually saving that is in a database somewhere, and then whatever happens later on. But this is a very typical use of message queues, is that something happens, you have to process it, because the processing takes time. That is put behind a queue, because then the one who generates the message is then free to continue in doing whatever, maybe just return a success message to the customer waiting behind the browser or something like that. The business requirement, like I just said, usually is that each message must get processed. There is, you cannot lose messages, they must get processed. And there is also another aspect, which usually is that people don't want duplicate data saved in the database, so that is also something you have to consider when doing that. And when you're building this system, so I have a very simple diagram here, so that is, and there's a database. So let's say you get the message and now you process it, and then you have to save it to the database. This is all fine. This is usually how I described it. This is how it happens. The questions that I want to point out, and whenever you're building such a thing that need attention, is what if something goes wrong? What if the database connection goes down? What if there is some data integrity issue in the database, you cannot save it? What if there is something wrong that you cannot save it? What can you do? This is the first thing what people forget about when thinking about these things, that there are these two things that, yes, the database is lost, I cannot save the results, but I have already received the message. Usually messaging systems provide an answer to that, which is called an acknowledgement, or if you cannot accept the message, you send it basically, you don't send it back, you basically say not acknowledged, which means that the message queue or the message broker will actually understand that the message was not consumed and will, in database terms, do a rollback basically to that. And that is a very useful feature. This is very easy to turn on usually when you automatically assumes that you have received the message, that's it, it forgets about it. But usually you want to acknowledge back whether that was okay or not. And that's from the API, but usually just confirm message I received or something. The problem here is, what if the database is down and you want to send the not acknowledged back to the queue, but that one is also gone away. So how do you do it then? What do you do?
Normally, a message broker has configuration for timeout. So if the message is taken and then times out, then it basically kind of does not acknowledge for you.
Yeah, maybe. But what if the reason usually why you're using a message broker, a message queue, is because your processing takes a long time? So tuning these timers. And there are ways around that, but this is something that I want to point out that is important to think about. There was a question or a comment somewhere back there as well.
First of all, you subscribe with specifically saying that consumer acts. That is the way the message broker knows that message is consumed by the consumer. If it's not, then it's still there in the total and the ready state. And well, I'm working with RabbitMQ a lot, so I don't know.
There are ways of achieving more reliability in these kind of scenarios. The reality is that there is no 100% guarantee how to achieve that, and that problem is nothing new. This is it's nothing new, and already a long time ago there was an idea of having distributed transaction managers. It's also called two-phase commit, and it's also called XA in some literature. I haven't seen that mentioned so much lately, but this is something that was an attempt to solve these kind of situations where you have two resources, like a database and a message queue, or two different databases, or two different any kind of resources, where a distributed transaction manager takes care of basically I won't go into the details, but the idea is that it can help to commit into both resources or none at all, so you can have this guarantee. In reality, although I have heard about these kind of systems, I have never seen these things work, and I have never heard about someone who is actually actively using it. So just something to be aware of, that these things, these ideas exist there, and this problem exists there, but there is not an easy answer that is 100% foolproof.
So as a result, then we can assume that messages get lost one way or another.
Not lost double.
The one problem is, yes, if the message broker, basically if I go back, if you cannot send back the not acknowledged, and depending on how your queue is configured, one way around it is that build your message consumer in a way that when it receives a message, it assumes that it might be a duplicate that is already processed, and maybe check from the database that maybe I don't need to do it. All these things, there are tricks. It means that you have to build more, let's say, infrastructure or this kind of not business problem specific code into the message consumer, which is usually how we deal with these kind of situations, that if the infrastructure is not good enough, we build it into our, let's say, business logic or the logic that we do it. So that's one way of doing it.
It's also considered generally a good practice to make such kind of workers idempotent, so that they can actually presume the same message.
Yeah, the problem there is that sometimes it's not that convenient. Sometimes maybe you have to do a request over the web, like do a REST call or something, and REST, you cannot commit or roll back a REST call. This is, you just either make it or not. So it's not that easy always. When I was preparing today for this, I just remembered something that already a long time ago, Martin Fowler, who is the author of a book called, I think it's Patterns of Enterprise Architecture, relatively old book in 2004 maybe or something, but he has used the term that messaging or an asynchronous solution is an architect's dream, but a developer's nightmare. And this is usually with the asynchronous queues, you can architect a very beautiful system where everything happens asynchronously sometimes, and eventually everything is good, and it all looks very good on paper. But when you're doing the development, then all these kind of things that you have to think about, the acknowledgement, the checking for duplicates, things like that, this all is the stuff that it's not the first thing when you read about the messaging system. Oh, take this, you put up the queue there, consume the messages, that's it, you're done. This is not usually the case. This is the same picture that I also added a, let's say, a producer, there's a queue, there's a consumer, and there's a database. And at the project we were working right now, and probably many other projects, the case is that that database is actually used also the same day. The producer is also part of the same system, so it's just that you need some asynchronous processing. They all use the same database. So that got me thinking, what if that queue might be actually inside that database? What if instead of having a separate message broker, what if we could have the queue inside of a database? And there are some commercial solutions for this, which I will come to later on, but just do it anyway. So this is like, it has become so generic that you usually when you are starting a new application, you have to pick some database that you will be using and stick to that. I tried to come up with a simple way of, without going into any kind of specific tricks of a database, but something. How can I do it with just plain old SQL technology? So if I create the message queue, a simple table that has an ID and that message, whether that the data types in this case I think are from Postgres. These might vary in your database vendor, but the idea I think is quite clear. There are some IDs that come from a sequence in some, and then there is the message, whatever that message is. In our case it was, I think, JSON, but really it doesn't matter what that message is. And then in the producer side, when you want to send a message, you just insert the message into that queue. It will, depending on how it will get an ID from the sequence, and that's it. So on the consumer side, you can actually do a simple select. You order by the ID, then that guarantees you the ordering, and you just take the message. You consume it, you actually, once you're done, you delete it from the queue and commit, and that's it. If you write something else into the same database regarding some other data, you can roll back everything, and also the taking of the message from the queue is rolled back. This is all very nice, but rather simplistic in terms that if you add, if you want to have some parallelism, and you have two threads or two processes, whatever, doing the select, then they will both take the same row, and this will still end up with duplicates.
Yes, and another thing that you don't know when to select.
This is, you can just poll. You can just have an endless loop polling, and you can have some strategies to do a backoff if you get like an empty queue. That depends on your business application, and there are definitely not ideal, let's say, ways how to receive the message compared to like a messaging system which just calls your callback method that here's a message, you just have to pull for that. But if you do that in a loop, either add a sleep there, or even if you don't have it, then you can tune it yourself. How often do you do it? And actually doing a very simple select which uses the primary key there also, and if the queue is empty, then, or if it gives nothing, then this is so fast that it's up to you how much you can you want to sleep between the polling. Nevertheless, when you have when you add another thread or process to that, you will have many processes taking the same message, and a simple solution usually for avoiding that in a database is actually locking that row as you do a select for update. What's wrong with this approach?
If someone dies.
If someone dies, then the database does a rollback automatically, and then the next one is actually picks up the same row. So that's still there.
You lock too many. You don't know which ID you have to lock. Otherwise, you have to make a two selects first. What to lock, then go and lock.
It probably depends on the database how it does the limit, but if you have the limit 1 there, I'm only taking one row from there. So you can, this is, let's say, somewhat simplified select from the database, but the idea is you choose one row and lock it. The problem usually with locking is that the next one wanting to do a select for update is actually blocking when they don't know whether that row gets consumed or not, so they don't know which one to actually return. So many of the databases actually, that is what I checked, is this is Postgres that we were using, MySQL has it, and also Oracle has it. Has a feature also called skip locked, which is like part of the, it's all part of the select sentence. So you can skip the locked rows. So one thread takes takes one row, locks it. The next one does the select. The skip locked means that if there are some rows locked, it will just ignore it. It will take the next row, whatever the order by will give it, and it will take it, and then that's it. And whenever you commit, then it's actually done. The skip locked was something new for me when I was investigating this problem. Is there a good solution? Something new to me. Both Postgres and MySQL gained that functionality relatively recently. I don't remember the years or dates, but the point is it's a relatively recent thing. But the problem is common in databases also in other situations, so that's why it's there. It's much longer time in Oracle, but that's a useful feature in building such a thing, but it also helps probably in other situations. For us, actually, this is a little bit simplified version of but something that we actually ended up using. This gave us database consistency, and it's a very simple system because for us the problem was that the customer that we were building the system for, they did have the database, so the Postgres was their requirement. They had a Postgres database for other purposes as well. They said, let's use that. A message queue was something new for them. We understood that the problem required a message queue, but that would have meant that there is a extra piece of infrastructure that we need to teach them how to install, how to keep up to date, how to keep running, maybe have some clusters, anything. So there is an extra piece of complexity, not only for development, but also for the running of the application along the road a longer time as well. So for us, that worked quite well. The only biggest difference with this is that we didn't delete from the queue, but we had a flag there that we marked it deleted or consumed something that we can take a history look back.
Question from your experiment with such approaches. Did you notice any performance drop in other parts of this database, like caused by workers constantly sitting on top of this
queue table and querying it over and over?
No, we didn't. Let's say the compromise we did is that we know that we will never have to process 200,000 messages per second. Probably there will be many seconds between different messages. But even then, I think we have a sleep in there. We have a few threads just to achieve parallelism if there are actually some messages in parallel. We have a few threads and it's also on 2 cluster nodes, or at least 2. I don't even know what they will end up in deploying. And then each of the thread polling there is a sleep there, 100 or a couple of 100 milliseconds. So that meant that, and we didn't notice any effect in the database at all, because the selects are so simple that it's quickly just returning empty set if there is nothing to consume.
But from monitoring memory usage and CPU, also nothing.
We haven't looked at the database details, so on the database side we haven't looked at that, but on the application side, having this polling thread, we don't notice it at all actually there. So yeah. Oracle has something called AQ, or advanced queuing, which is a full-blown messaging system built into Oracle database. If you're on Oracle, this is a very good system, and I definitely recommend to use that if you have it.
There is one nuance: if you go rack, it doesn't work.
Okay, doesn't work at all, or?
No, it starts with several issues, because rack means real application cluster, when you have to synchronize it between clusters, and then if you have active queuing, then sometimes synchronization goes off.
Okay. So, then okay, my experience with Oracle AQ is from Swedbank about 10 years ago, where I do believe we had rack, and although I wasn't so much involved in actually running that application in production, were there any issues with that? But we achieved quite good results with actually we had the same concerns were that some events would actually generate inside the database, so we could have database triggers sending messages while the consumers were sometimes out of the database. So these kinds of combinations all were very, very useful. So at least in my experience, the advanced queuing has been quite a good system if you're on Oracle. So that, and then it has all the different functionalities of publish, subscribe, point to point, and all that stuff. So that's an option. Postgres also has a listen and notify commands, where you can listen on basically a piece of string, and then if you anything basically, and then if you say notify the same string, then anyone listening on that thing will get the notification. So this is a very primitive publish subscribe you could build on that. The problem for that was that we needed point to point instead of publish subscribe, and also we are on Java. At least the JDBC driver for Postgres doesn't allow very easy way to listen on something, so that was out of the question for us. But something to be aware of, if you do have a database that then and you need asynchronous processing, then a separate message queue is not always the best option. Yeah, and to summarize the benefits for us is a database most of the database, I don't know if you are venturing into the new NoSQL world, then maybe not, but most of the databases that, SQL databases that are out there today are very reliable. They are old technologies, and old in this context means good. They are proven, they work, and all the locking, row-level locking, and all these kind of concepts are there for many decades, not many years, many decades already. So the concepts are not new, and they do work. For us, that actually, and also for developers, messaging is for many developers is a relatively, at least not that familiar. Doing a database query is much more familiar to most of the developers, and even if you are very well aware of all the messaging nuances, if you have a large team of developers, then having a database based solution might be more approachable to other people. And less dependencies. This is what I mentioned, is that we didn't need to tell our customer that you need to install yet another piece which needs maintaining, needs maybe clustering, other options. That this was already technology that existed, and I think is the same in many other projects. Yeah, easier to understand also easier to understand for people like database administrators or whatever kind of admin suffixed people you have around the system who have to run the thing later on. Usually with the queuing systems where I have built systems that use queues, actual message queues. When you put it into production, the first things come, how do I know what is in the queue, what is not yet processed, and how much is there, what's the throughput, something. Then you end up building actually tools on top of that, or having some ready-made tools, but still separate tools that show the length of a queue, how that is being consumed, and things like that. What are the messages inside the queue? This was a queue browser is something some of you are with Swedbank background. I think many years ago, I think we built something called queue browser exactly, especially for that purpose. That with a database, anyone with some knowledge knows how to do a select, and then can look at the results of that, maybe how many messages are there or what's the content. But with queuing systems, there isn't such an easy interface, and you have to consider that as well. So that's an important aspect. So that's it actually from my side. Just something to consider when building your next system. Thank you. Yeah, I don't. Okay.
Number one was there.
Yeah, I wanted to say that if there is a problem with using skip.lock because it's not available in your version of database, then I have actually used the same kind of solution with NoWe, which basically is available, but the error handling gets a bit more tricky. What it basically does is that it just fails if the row is locked, and otherwise it works quite well. You have batch process, and you know that usually they are locked, which was our case.
When I was building that system, I stumbled upon a blog by a guy who at least there proved why no wait is not good enough for such a solution. I cannot remember the details, but if you probably Google for Postgres messaging skip lock, then no wait, you will find that. I can't remember the details, but there are. But yes, if you don't have it, then and depending on how your database implements no wait, then that might also be an option.
Now, if you have a choice what to do, and like client says do whatever, will you still go the same way, or you still use like some IMTP implementations like Rabbit?
I would most likely, I would, depending on the type of messages there are. But if this is like a business system which needs persistence anyway, and the other side of that processing is anyway in the database, that I have to do something, I have to, then I would most likely use a database again, because this is just so much easier concept to grasp myself. I take a row, I have to process it, commit it, or roll back. That's such an easy. I mean, putting up an RabbitMQ, having the exchanges, topics, all the configurations there, this is, I mean, there are probably reasonable use cases where that is useful, and if you don't have a database, then definitely I wouldn't take a database for that, but I can't remember when I was last building a system which didn't involve a database.
Okay, any more questions?
If not, just we will take a break. You're welcome to walk around. There is one floor below which you...
It's a different perspective on messaging indeed. Thank you so much for this one.
Thank you.
There's a universe inside you. Why are you pushing it away? Leave behind your own deception and learn to live another day. There's a universe inside you, your galaxy of happiness. I just wanna help you find it. We'll explore in baby steps. There's a universe inside you. You've gotta give it room to breathe. So let the universe excite you, 'cause that's the way it's meant to be.
Lover, what's holding you down? I ain't like others, don't let them hold your ground. I am in the somber sky. I am hearing all the lies. Don't turn your back on me, I'm here for you. I'll light your fire as the goal comes true. You'll be my passenger and I'll break through. I'll break through.
Sul on iga sõnum on nagunii ju iseseisev. Sa mõtled sama sõnumi või?
jah, näiteks teine versioon. see endine on muutunud.
Sa mõtled, et nad töötavad sama asja või midagi?
Jah, sama asja.
Aga see probleem on sul ju sõltumata sellest, kas see messaging, et kas see sõnum tuleb sul läbi baasi selles mõttes, et see probleem on sul igal juhul olemas.
Igal juhul, see on kõige parem asi.
go, losing self-control. I keep telling myself, but I don't wanna let you know. Is this what we become? Strangers on the run, looking for something, chasing the sun. All those days trying to find a place where you only can just be alone, be alone. All those nights lying by your side, like it's a vibe, feeling it shine under your spotlight. All those nights lying by your
walking through the rain, don't know where I'm going. My head's leading me astray, yeah, you follow knowing. Getting deeper in the frame, I see your face, I feel the pain, but you chose the path I follow. I'm in love with the way that you hold me when I fall back down. And I'm in love with the words from your voice that put me off the ground now. This love's been a long time coming. My breath slows but my heart keeps running. I'm so fed up of the lies that my heart believed in, but staring deep into your eyes makes it all forgiven. I feel my comfort will be blown, my fears will grow out of control. Yeah, you still walk the path I follow anyways. I'm in love with the way that you hold me when I fall back down. And I'm in love with the words from your voice that put me off the ground now. This love's been a long time coming. My breath slows but my heart keeps running. I'm in love with the way that you hold me when I fall back down. And I'm in love with the words from your voice that put me off the ground now. This love's been a long time coming. My breath slows but my heart keeps running. Don't feel fucking at me. 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 Come on. Don't feel fucking at me. Don't feel fucking at me. Come on. Don't feel fucking at me. Don't feel fucking at me. Don't feel fucking, 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 fucking.
you're interested, normal like late deal price is now already like 250, I believe. For DEVCLUB special deal, they have tickets available for 99 euros. And this is the address. This is unfortunately the only way I can share it with you. So yeah, if you're interested, please take note. It's gonna be here, or just reach me out after the talk or during the talk, preferably after the talk still. And then now we proceed to the second talk of the Puzzlers. Please welcome Anton Keks. Codeborne very
Before we go with the Puzzlers, I just found a couple of pictures of this office 1 year ago, so maybe for you to recognize some of the places. So this is where we pair program. So this is where you came in, or came up here. And this is also on the lower floor. Unfortunately, we don't have it. It was thrown away. And yeah, I think I don't have many pictures from the upper floor. So while people are coming, there's also a couple of pictures on the internet. Like there was. So when the new floor. So yeah, the University City is quite proud of that they have renovated this building, because according to Postimees, this building was the former director's house or building of the DEVCLUB.EE factory. So where we are now. Okay, and now let's proceed with Puzzlers. Before I start, I want to ask you, how many of you have written anything in Kotlin? Okay, some. That's good. So, as you've heard, the second speaker, the announced speaker, was cancelled, so I had to quickly use my other presentation from the Kotlin Conf, where I'm going in the beginning of October. So these are completely new, never before seen Kotlin Puzzlers, like a premiere for you. So. Kotlin, for those who don't know, or is there anybody who doesn't know anything about Kotlin? Even, okay, a little bit fewer than those who have used it, but still there are. So it is a relatively new JVM language. It's designed to be compatible, very well interoperable with Java. So basically you can write half of your code in Java, half in Kotlin. This is how it was designed, because JetBrains, who is the developer of Kotlin, they made this language first for themselves. So they can develop their own products, like IntelliJ IDEA and all kind of IDEs and other products that they have. So now also there is a compiler that compiles Kotlin to JavaScript. Subset of Kotlin. Then there is also Kotlin native, which targets iOS and other native platforms. So it's not only a JVM language anymore. So it was pragmatic and concise. So it's you need to write less. It's modern language than in Java, for example, and it's open source. And it has obviously very good tooling from the start, because it's developed by the company who produces and sells IDEs. So basically, when designing the language, they skipped all the pitfalls of Scala or dynamic languages to create the language that is so that they be able to provide good tooling for the language. And it's since previous year, it's now the official language of Android. So that's maybe a short introduction. So it took 6 years to get to 1.0. So it's actually, they started it in 2010, the year when we started Codeborne, actually. And they changed the logo during these years. And given the amount of time, it should be a perfect language, of course.
And it took SpaceX a little bit less time to be able to land the rockets back on Earth. So
SpaceX use Kotlin?
I don't know, but there are many companies who do.
If they did, they would manage to do it faster.
Maybe. So, and now to Puzzlers. So Puzzlers is a like, who has been to a Puzzlers talk before? Not everyone. Okay. So Puzzlers basically is a type of a conference talk where I present you and or somebody else short programs in some given programming language, and you need to try to understand what this program does. Basically, I show all the programs in the IDE, but as a warning for you, I have errors and warnings disabled, so you will not get the help from IDE to understand the thing. And so, all programs, they print something, so you need to guess. We will be voting for what the programs do print. So, and then I run the program. So it's not like the only slideware, we do it the real stuff. And then we see what really happens, and if needed, we need to also discuss what's the thing. So yeah, Kotlin was also designed to avoid well-known Java puzzlers. So so it doesn't have many of the Java puzzlers, but of course it has quite a few of its own. So it's a pragmatic language, not ideal. It was designed to be a great tool for developing stuff. It's not a scientific or not a theoretical language. And all the puzzlers are tested and run with fresh Kotlin 1.3 release candidate, which is available already. So, ready? The puzzlers are available on GitHub as well, so you can submit new ones. And so we start with the first one. So the first puzzler is called Many Hellos, and is basically, if you're not familiar with Kotlin, you probably can still recognize that we have a function called hello with return type of Boolean, and it calls another function, which is println, which calls another function and another function, and then we call this function. So there are the options that that program can print. So what do you think? So obviously, I can help you that obviously this should be executed first, I think, from the outer function. It's like a normal language. So so it's like there should be probably hello, should be world, or if the program compiles, of course. So what I, of course, need to warn you that if there are options in puzzlers like will not compile and something else, then you should very carefully consider these options, because otherwise they wouldn't be puzzlers. So who thinks that the output of this program would be just a hello world? Like some people? Great. So who thinks that it will be hello world false? I think there are more people thinking that there will be false. Okay. Who thinks that will be hello world true? Not so many. So, and who thinks that this is a nonsense, it shouldn't compile? The D means that you think that it should not compile. It's a not normal program. Yeah, so let's now run it, and let me see. Drum roll, and it's hello world. So who has guessed A? You can try to explain. Anyone wants to explain, or yeah?
So it executed from left to right. So it first did printing, and then it returned false and didn't print out false because it wasn't told to print out false.
Yeah, that's correct. This return actually, it returns earlier than this print is actually run. So yeah, that's correct. But why is it at all possible to do these kind of things? Why does it compile?
I come from dynamic programming language.
So there you can write just any stuff. Yeah, the important thing about Kotlin is that it's a completely statically typed, type-safe language. So yeah, and anyone can guess why you can...
So what's the type of the return statement?
The type of the return statement is nothing. So basically in Kotlin everything is an expression, and most of the statements like return and throw, they're also statement expressions, and their return type officially is nothing, but nothing can have no instances. So if we look how nothing is defined, then it actually has a private constructor, so there can be no instances of nothing. And compiler uses nothing actually to mark the code that is unreachable. Basically, in JVM, nothing is mapped to Java lang void, for your information. But yeah, that's why everything has a return type. That's why you can actually compare. And what do you think is the return type of print?
True like
nothing. No, it's not Boolean. It's actually it's a mapped function in the JVM. It's the same as standard system out print that we all use on the JVM. So which in Java returns what? Void, yeah. And in Kotlin, the void is mapped to unit. Unit is another type, which is a really useful thing, is that it's a type that can have only one instance. So because it's an object, oh sorry, so there can be only one unit, and that's why actually if we return this, if we remove this thing and run it, then we actually get the option C. So we should, but
I need to return Boolean.
Yeah, when it returns something, so that's just return false here. So, and yeah, then we get hello world true, because both prints return units, and units are always equal. So that's the thing, and that's actually it's a really good thing, because you can use print also in expressions and void Java void methods, which is really useful. So let's proceed. The next puzzler is submitted by a Japanese guy. So you can see we have some integers and we cast them. So here probably, to those who are not familiar with Kotlin, I need to explain a little bit that the question mark means that this type is nullable. It means in Kotlin by default types are not nullable, so you cannot assign a null to a variable. So they are fixing the $1 billion mistake that is exists in Java. So and the triple equal sign, so it's actually the reference equality, the same as the in Java the two equal sign, because the two equal signs in Kotlin is the equality by value. So it's like the same as calling equals method in Java. So and we have here like just comparing a little more stuff. So probably you have already been able to parse the program, so let's vote on the outcome. So who thinks it will be true, true? Which is like an obvious answer. I would think that it should be true, true, true. Yeah, not many people. So you don't think that puzzlers can have an obvious answer? Good. So who thinks it will be false, false? B. So there are a little bit more people. Who thinks a little bit true and false? C. There are even more people. So.
Which doesn't make sense.
And I think the D would be the rest of the audience. So who thinks the D, none of the above? It's even less than C, probably. So yeah, let's just run it and see. So the drum roll. And it's true, false. So who can explain?
So it's initialization in Java when it's from minus 127 to 127. They create this tool, string literals, what it's called, I don't remember by heart. So then in this case, when you compare from minus 127 to 127, it will be kind of like primitive comparison.
And that's correct. The thing here is that the JVM also uses the boxing like Java, and in Java all the numbers from minus 128 to 127, they are cached, like their values. So they are boxed by just reusing the instances. That's why this one is the same instance, and this one after boxing is another instance. Can you tell me why there is boxing at all happening here? It's because we are casting it to the nullable type, and nullable type, of course, requires boxing, so it's not the primitive type anymore. So yeah, that's the thing. So to get the true, we just make it like this. So I have actually never seen any program in Kotlin that uses the triple equality. It's not really useful. So the next one is inspired by Erik Jõgi when I showed the last set of puzzlers in Codeborne. So another puzzler with integers. So before you start guessing, I can tell you this is the minimum int, the minimum value of the 32-bit signed integer. So what happens when we increment it? So not much code here. So what do you think? Like with option A, meaning that its absolute value will decrease. Then, yeah, go. Okay, nice. Then option B, like it will get past the boundaries of min-int. So, yeah, why not? Then option C, that it will overflow, like integers should do when you increment the smallest number. And who thinks that there will be none of the above? Something else. Okay, then let's run it. Drum roll. And it doesn't compile. So it's D is the correct answer, none of the above. And who can guess why?
Oh, it says why.
Yeah, obviously, but can you explain why it's so?
Order of execution.
Yeah, that's correct. So the thing is that the functions, extension functions in the Kotlin compiler, they have the precedence over the unary operator. So basically this minus is a unary operator, which is a unary minus, and it's executed after the incrementation happens. And because incrementation produces a bigger number than int can hold, then, or actually this number already is a long in Kotlin because it doesn't fit into an int. As you know, that's always the smallest negative number, its absolute value is 1 bigger than the biggest positive value. So that's why it's long, so we increment it, and yeah. And obviously if we use here the just regular print, then it works, because here we pass it to a function that requires an int. That's why it doesn't compile. So, but if we do it like this, then it's just a long, and everything works. So you get the option B. So let's proceed. Breaking lines. So as you can see, Kotlin is a nice, concise language that doesn't use semicolons. So semicolons are not modern anymore. They feel like old crap coming from C++. So why should you write them? And of course, in Kotlin, you can write semicolons if you really want to, but the official code style enforces you not to. So, and imagine you have some variables. Val in Kotlin means that it's an immutable variable, basically a value, like in Scala. So we have 2 and a 2. Then we have some list that we map to the sum of these values. So list has only one element, so basically this map function should be executed only once. And yeah, so who thinks that the result of the mapping will be a list with 1? Nobody. Okay. Who thinks the result will be list with 2? Just one hand. Okay. Who thinks it will be 4? Yeah, I would think it will be 4. It's obvious. And who thinks that it will be 1 and 4? For some reason. And the rest of the people think that it will be none of the none of the above, I guess. So yeah, let's see who is right. Maybe the rest of the people are right. Okay. And the correct answer is B. So who can explain?
Plus is the unary one.
Plus is unary one, correct. Why?
Because it starts on the beginning of the line.
Yeah. So this is the price you pay for the language without semicolons. Basically in Java this kind of things cannot happen because you need to always finish the statement with a semicolon. If you do the same with JavaScript probably or any other language which doesn't need you to put the semicolon, you need to be careful when you're breaking lines because you can not. So yeah, so a compiler in a semicolon-less language need to always put its own decision where the statement ends. You look like complete the value of the last variable. So that's why it's 2.
Suggest any legitimate use of a unary plus operator where you would need that kind of thing there? Or would someone put that into a language?
Unary plus is used with Kotlin DSLs. But I don't have any other like mathematical use for it, and but the thing is that you can always you can also use the unary minus, or like if you use the actually I haven't tried it that way. So this is the way how to fix it. So you need to terminate the line with the so that for compiler it's obvious that it's not over yet. But if you write it like this, then maybe it will work. Let's see. Yeah, this one doesn't work for the same reason. So so a compiler thinks that they are 2 separate statements. So let's proceed. So now let's look a little bit at more of the simple code. So we have 2 variables. One is nullable 2. One is non-nullable, which is 3. Actually, in Kotlin, for the second case, you don't even need to declare the type because the compiler can easily infer it. In the first case, it will infer it as int, so you need to declare it as a nullable int. So, and we just sum it, and this operator, who knows what it does? Yeah, it's called Elvis operator, so it's basically checks if x is a null. If it's null, then it uses the value on the right. So if it's not null, then the real value of x is used. So it's like just like Groovy. This operator comes from Groovy. So who thinks that the result would be 3? There are some people, okay. Who thinks it will be 5? Like kind of obvious answer. Who thinks it will be only 2? Somebody will eat the 3. Okay. And who thinks it will be 0? Okay. At least one person. So let's run it. Drum roll, and it's 2. So, anyone?
Order of 0 plus 3 is the 3. 0 plus 3 is the average value.
So the thing is that it's executed like this. So yes. So this operator has a lower precedence than the plus. So if you want to have 5, obviously, then you may write it like this. So if you use it in an expression like that. But yeah. It's actually the same thing that exists with Java ternary operator also. The precedence there is not always obvious. So the next puzzler. It's about the collections now. We have we declare a list of 3 integers. Then we check if it's a mutable list, and if it's a mutable list, then we add 4 to it, and then we print it. So if you don't know what the type of list of returns, we can check that it's actually, okay, it's too small here, but it's just a list, it's not a mutable list. So you can see it returns a list. And in Kotlin, there is a difference between list and mutable list. So the plain list is not mutable. So they have fixed Java in this respect. So what do you think? So basically the question is, will this comparison succeed or not? Or will it compile at all? So who thinks it will be 1, 2, 3? So the immutable list will stay immutable. Yeah, I kind of also joined this party. So who thinks that is B? It will be somehow an element will be added. Yeah, there are some people. Who thinks that it should generate an unsupported operation exception? Meaning that the if should succeed. Yeah, there are some people. You will need to explain it if it's true. And who thinks that it will not compile because compiler kind of sees that it's not mutable? Yeah, there are some people, and actually Kotlin's compiler is quite smart in some of the cases. So let's see. And it's unsupported operation exception. So who can explain?
Maybe is not a type check. What is is?
Is exactly the same as the instance of in Java. So it is a type check. So we check here if it's a mutable list. But who can explain why this is succeeded by add did not?
And you don't have to put any semicolon for after if.
No semicolon tricks here.
So just spaces.
Oh, that's not true. Okay, I think I should explain that myself. So the thing is that Kotlin learned from Scala that Scala has tried to fix Java collections as well, and they have created completely new collections. The problem with Scala approach was that when you needed to interrupt with Java, you needed always to convert your collections from back and forth, and it's really bad for performance. So you needed to wrap and unwrap and copy elements. So Kotlin, they still wanted to have better collections than Java, but they wanted them to be performant as well. So they actually decided that the list and mutable list are both mapped to the Java util list, but only compiler, like at compile time, compiler ensures that if you have a list which is not mutable in Kotlin code, you will never be able to mutate it. So basically it doesn't have the list interface in Kotlin, it doesn't have any add methods. But the thing is that when we do the check at runtime, then we can actually bypass the safety of the compiler and we can still do bad things. Exactly the same way as you can do with Java generics. So you can have a list of integers, but at runtime you can put the string into it and it will break. So, if you don't do this kind of runtime things, then you are safe. And the thing is that the implementation of list here is actually, it still doesn't allow adding of elements. So at runtime it also preserves the immutability of the list, just in the same way as collections unmodifiable list in Java does. But it still is an instance of Java util list. That's why at runtime Kotlin cannot do more than is possible in the JVM.
Can you jump into mutable list? Where does it go?
It is a Kotlin mutable list, the same as the, so it's mutable collection in extends Kotlin list, and Kotlin list has fewer methods than the Java util list. So, but that runtime compiler on the JVM, it maps it to the Java util list in JavaScript and Kotlin native, of course, this code would produce a different result. So, a little bit more about the collections. So, we have again a list. In this case, it's an array list of some elements. We sort it because array list is actually a mutable list. And so we can sort it and we can print. So who thinks that, not a lot of code, probably you have already seen it. So who thinks that the order of the list will stay the same for some reason? Nobody? Really? Yeah, one brave person, nice. So who thinks that it will be sorted, like option B? Like obviously it should be. Why would we call this sort method? Who thinks that this code will not compile? Maybe I lied to you, an array list of is not a mutable list. Yeah, there is somebody. And anything else? None of the above?
Will it return some, print some boolean, like true sort of?
Yeah. Okay, very good for you. So many people already start understanding how it all works. Yes, the Kotlin unit is the return type of sort method because this sort method is directly borrowed from Java, and in Java it mutates the list. I actually gave you a hint before that array list of is a mutable list. That's why it has the sort method, and immutable list doesn't have it. Immutable list has another method which is sorted, and that one would give the option B. So it will be actually sorted. A copy of this list will be returned. So another puzzler. So it's called abstract null, and a little bit more code already. So it's getting more advanced. So I'm really proud that you guessed. Many people guessed the previous one. So we have abstract class called null save blank. It has a property, abstract property called name, and it has a property called logo, which takes the first letter of the name. And there's a class Kotlin which extends class null save blank and overrides the property name and specifies its own value Kotlin with lowercase k. So, and then we create a new instance of Kotlin. You can see we don't write new in Kotlin. It's a little bit easier. So compiler can always understand when it's a function, when it's a constructor. And we can read what is inside of logo. So what do you think? Will we get the k?
What does val mean?
Val? Val means it's a value. Yeah, it's a property.
Immutable property.
Yeah. Val is an immutable property. Yeah, you cannot change the value of it. So it's the, like if you write var, then it's just a mutable property that you can change later, but val you cannot change later. You can only assign it once. And here you can think of these properties about the same as Java fields. So in this context, I think that it's not much difference.
Well, you cannot have a final abstract field in Java, so this is what you're writing here.
Okay, so yeah, so in Java, this would be compiled to get name. Yeah, that would be an abstract getter in JVM. And so the vals, they have only getters, and var, they have getter and setter. So they compiled to both. So that's why you can override it, and you can specify a new value. So who thinks we get the k, the logo of Kotlin? I would think so. No? Everyone put their hands down, then I said that I would think so. So who thinks that we get the null pointer exception? There are some people. I didn't mention it that Kotlin almost gives you the null safety. So they say that if you write code that doesn't produce any warnings or errors, you should never get null pointer exception. Basically, the same promise as there is in Java with generics. You will not get class cast exception if you don't write code without warnings. So, and who thinks it will be illegal state exception? C. Some also people. And who thinks that it will not compile? Kirill thinks that changed his mind. Yeah, there is. It exists. Kotlin null pointer exception. Yeah, we'll get to it later. So, drum roll, and we get just a regular null pointer exception that we should not get normally. So who can guess?
Oh, it looks like a regular Java exercise when the class is not constructed yet.
Yeah.
And you already get the property.
That's completely correct. So because here actually this one is not the body of the getter, it's the initializer of this field. And if you want this to work, then you write get here. Then this expression is the body of the getter. Then it will be executed later when you call it. But if you don't write it, then it is accessed actually before this class can put its own value there. It's because the parent class is initialized first.
Only a method, not a variable.
Yeah, but still, this is like, this declaration is exactly the same as you would write string logo in Java equals. So it's just the initializer of the
But it should be
field.
get name.
Yeah, it calls get name, and at this point,
If the get name is implemented, then
yeah.
it should work in Java.
Yeah, it should work if we implement get name. So we can implement get name like this. But because we haven't implemented it, we just provided the initializer. So basically what happens is that this thing is executed before this thing, because the parent class is constructed before the child class. So yeah, if you don't overwrite values like this, then you're safe. So when you're overriding values, you better provide a new getter, not the initializer. So then another interesting puzzler with a few lines of code. So we have a mutable list again. The type of elements of the list is lambda. Lambda that takes no parameters and returns nothing. Basically just a regular runnable in Java. And we get the empty mutable list, then we go from 1 to 3 and we print values of I and j. We actually add them to the list and then we go through them and execute them. So again, to clarify, the type of the elements which are inside of the list, they are lambdas, executable by blocks of code. And so we fill the list with lambdas, and then we execute them all. It's like the messaging that Erik was talking before. So we have a queue, we fill it with some stuff, and then we process them. So, anyone ready to vote? So let's start with A. So who thinks it will be like everything in correct order? 1s, 2s, and 3s. So yeah, we believe in the initial assumption. So who thinks it's B? So it will be, for some reason, 3 will stuck. So there's like a couple of hands. Who thinks it's C? Like the 3 in I was stuck. There are more people. And who thinks it will be something else, totally different? D? That's always a good answer to vote for. So if I would be giving money for the answers, then that would be the best answer for sure. So let's try. So, and the correct answer is C. So I heard Erik told C before, so why?
Lambda is executing after the increment. The I is already free when you execute lambda.
Yes, that's correct. So actually, if we would remove lambda from here and execute them right away, then we would obviously get A. So it will work as expected. And here actually, the thing is that E is a var, it's a variable that can be changed. And here we actually use the variable that has changed already. So when we execute it here, then we already get the last value of I in all of the cases. But J is actually its value. It's an immutable, and that's why it's passed to the lambda as an immutable value. And it's a part of the, like the ETA which says that it's captured in closure. And this one is passed by reference, and that's why we get this result. So this kind of thing is not possible in Java at all. So you know, in Java, in order to use something inside of a lambda, it needs to be final or effectively final. But in Kotlin, you can use variables in lambdas, but you get what you get, basically. Actually, I tried the same thing in JavaScript, and in JavaScript, the correct answer was 333333, because obviously in JavaScript there is no immutable variables. And in Java, it's not possible. So another one. So we have a function that takes two booleans, and it just prints it, both of them. And we have like some numbers here, and we compare them. So like a quite easy code, I would guess. So even for the late evening. So what do you think? Would it produce true and true? Who thinks it will be true and true? You need to look up the numbers. So who thinks it will be false and false? Some people hesitant. Like C, come on, C is like 3 and A is like 1. So yeah, it should be false. And they are all immutable also, so there are no tricks with mutability. And who thinks it will be null and null? C? No one? Yeah, where does it come from? So D. Anyone? A couple of hands. So let's now run it. And it did not compile. So why?
I think because prints statement is executed in the declaration, and A and B doesn't exist at that point, no?
No, that's not true. It's actually much easier. I need to show you, enable the errors. And actually, I consider it's a bug, as a bug in the compiler, but I'm sure that at Kotlin Conf, the JetBrains will explain me why it's not. Basically, if you can see, compiler thinks that this is a type parameter. So if you write it like this, and it works. So 6 years in development and 2 years more, and maybe there is a reason for that. I will ask the creators. So what's the thing with it? But this puzzler was submitted to me twice, like in a little bit different way. So it's obviously something that people really run into. So another one. Not a lot of code. So we have a class called hipster, and you can see it here we have these type parameters, now the real ones. And we have a type T, which is defined. Like an in and out in Kotlin is a better way to explain the same thing that bounded wildcards do in Java. So the bounded wildcards, familiar thing, I guess. Question mark extends, question mark super. So this syntax is taken from C#. So in C#, the bounded wildcards are called in and out. So basically, they are actually easier to understand. So if we take hipster, then hipster, according to type T, is a consumer. It takes T in. And if it would be out T, then the hipster would be a producer of T. So it would be output T. So it's easier to understand than super and extends. So, but what we have here is that we have in one place in and the other place out. And we create an instance, we eat burger and fries, and what do we get? So hipster, because he has an in, he's a consumer. So he consumes stuff. So who thinks that A, he will consume burger and fries successfully? A couple of people. So people don't believe in consuming of burger and fries, or don't believe in hipster consuming them. So who thinks that is B, class cast exception?
So how can
couple of hands.
Yeah. How can a function argument have something out producing? Okay, so adding things to that set.
Yeah, because it's like if you define the object that has some relation with T, this object can be either consumer or producer of T's, then you can cast this object to the super type or the subtype of T. Or it can be both. In this case, you don't write in and out. Then you cannot cast it to something that has a subtype or supertype of T. So basically, list of objects cannot be cast to list of strings, and vice versa. So yeah. So basically, and you can have an object that is both. And you can define methods which are in or output, and then compiler knows what can be passed to this method. So now let's get further. Who thinks that is C will not compile due to conflicting variants? You will need to explain what a variance is. Who thinks that D will not compile due to failed type inference? Yeah, some hands. So let's try. Obviously, it will not compile because there are even two options of not compiling. And yeah, it doesn't compile. So, and yes, the problem is with type inference. So basically, here the answer was much easier. Compiler doesn't know what is T when you just create the instance of hipster. So it can be fixed very easily, like this. Like we don't care what is T. So what do you think in this case it will happen? A. Okay, let's run it again. And yeah, that is A. So why we don't have the variance problem?
Because I don't know what it is.
So basically, variance, this in and out things, they are called in computer science, they are variant types, and there are like two subclasses of variant. They are covariant and contravariant. Covariant means that you are consuming T's, and contravariant means that you are producing T's. But here we have in and here we have out, and for some reason it works. If I enable...
Because you're not trying to customate anything.
Yeah, actually here there is a very interesting warning that the compiler shows that this projection is redundant. It's actually the same as just writing this, because hipster is already a consumer of T. And this is actually the same. So if I write like this, then it's a compiler error. So you cannot write like this because now you are having conflicting variants. And the thing is, it's hard to understand. I will leave it as a homework. So basically, when you're writing these variants in a type or in a method, they are reversed. And you need to think why. It's actually quite logical when you think about it. But it's probably as difficult in Kotlin as it is in Java. So these kind of things. So a couple of more puzzlers. So we have a data class. Data class in Kotlin is a really nice thing that actually generates all the boilerplate for you in Kotlin. So all the equals, hash code, compare to, and whatever. And you can define fields or properties of your data class or any class actually as constructor parameters. They will automatically become fields, so you don't need to specify them twice or even 3 times like you do it in Java. Then you create classes. So, and this example also shows a nice feature of Kotlin. It's a delegation. You can see that container actually extends list, or implements it in this case, because list is an interface. And there is a by keyword that means that this is the delegation. It means that it implements all the methods of list by delegating to items that is provided here as a constructor parameter. So then what we can also do in Kotlin, like in Python, we can destructure classes, even lists and whatever. So we can actually define 2 variables that will get 2 components of container. So you don't need to write container equals container, then you write container.name, container.items. You can destructure it if you need it. So obviously we need to get Kotlin here and a list here. So, and then we print it. So obviously it should be A. No? Yeah, only one person thinks so. So then what about B? There will be some disappeared items from the list for some reason. No? Nobody? Maybe C. 1 and 2, yeah. So the Kotlin will disappear, yeah? And who thinks this will be D? Only 2 will stay? Also some people. So all the options got some votes. And it will be hello Kotlin 2. Like, I think I saw a hand there. It's actually really difficult to explain. It's one of the hardcore puzzlers that I have for the guys at the Kotlin Conf. So yeah, for you, I just wanted to show the features of the language, which are pretty cool. And the thing here is that the data classes, they really automatically generate methods, component 1 and component 2 for all of their fields, so that you can destructure it. So destructuring works for classes who have methods named component 1, component 2, component 3, and so on. As many as there are components, so you can have so many variables when you're destructuring it.
What's the point of creating a class and then immediately destructuring it?
Of course, there is no point, it's just a puzzler. So all of this code that I'm showing...
Why have this feature?
It's not immediately. Maybe in some cases you want to destructure it much later. So you want to like pass it somewhere. It's just like a more convenient way of getting stuff out. So instead of writing like, you can also destructure a collection. So you can like, if you care about the 2 first elements, you can write like this equals list. And you will get first 2 elements from this list. So you don't need to write get 1, 0, get 1, or something like that. So there is some point, but yeah. And the thing here is that because we are delegating to a list, and list also has component 1 and component 2 methods. And actually there is basically a conflict. So the thing is here, which component methods wins, the containers or the delegates. So basically we get here that the component 1 is won by the container, component 2 is won by the list. Why? Let's see, like the author provided some explanation as well, so we can look at it. That's why, because it's private. Yeah, the thing is, yeah, the trick here is that this would work correctly if items is not private. And because items is private, then the component 2 of the container is private, and that's why, but this delegation shows you the component 2 of the list. So, and I think, because probably you're already, I'll show you like only 2 more. So, in Kotlin 1.3, there is a new cool feature called unsigned numbers. So finally, on the JVM, you can have unsigned types. That I think Kotlin has written in some documentation of Java 1.0 that probably we will introduce the unsigned keyword soon to the JVM, but it never happened. Obviously, he thought that nobody needed it, but actually, if you're working with, if you're writing networking code like I do, you very often need unsigned types. It's quite inconvenient in Java to work with bits and bytes, and if you're working with IP addresses or something like that, you need to always think about the sign that should not be there. And the thing is that in now Kotlin 1.3, there are now unsigned types. And they're called uint or ulong and whatever. And there's also the u that you can use for literals. So you can assign unsigned 0 to x. And then obviously you can do something with it. So Kotlin allows you to implement operators also. Only the really small set of operators that you can like redefine for your class. So that in Kotlin, when you're working with big decimals, of course, you use the normal plus and minus. You don't write .add and .subtract. So, yeah, that's about the theory. And the practice, what do you think will happen when we take the unsigned 0 and we decrement it? So obviously, we will not get -1, right? And what happens, yeah, in both cases, there is a decrement. So these numbers are, this number is a maximum value of unsigned 32-bit integer, just for your information. So who thinks it will be A? So it will be decremented once, it will be overflown to the max value, then you will decrement it again, and you'll get one smaller number. Nobody thinks. For me, it's quite a almost obvious answer. Okay, who thinks it will be B? Like, yeah, these are the guys who have burned their hands in C probably, or C++. You guys know that this thing will decrement x, but still pass the old value, right? And this guy, this will pass the new value. So this is the thing that Kotlin. Yeah. So this is something that Kotlin probably also like inherits from C, like all the other languages which are newer. Okay, so B, no? I would think it should be B. Okay, who thinks it's C for some reason? So we lose the unsignability, or okay, and who thinks that it should not compile? So compiler will not allow us to decrement 0. Nobody. Or some people, yeah. But the rest of you, none of the above? And the correct answer is 0 minus 2. So I need to tell you that this is an experimental feature in Kotlin 1.3. So actually, to use this feature in Kotlin 1.3, you need to enable the experimental features of the compiler. Otherwise, unsigned numbers will not be available to you. This is because they are still testing it. So maybe there will be some refinements and whatever. So the thing is that when we actually uint is implemented as of course a class that has int inside of it. And it's, for example, mean values or max value is defined like this one, so everything is obvious. And but there is also a new feature of Kotlin. It's called Inline Class. So Inline Class is created for performance. So this is something that I'm really looking forward to, because this will allow us to use the type-safe classes for things like usernames, passwords, or something that you usually use a string for. And usually you lose the type safety. You can just pass these things around and you can mix them up. So inline classes, they also a compiler-only feature that doesn't exist at runtime. So it's compiler checks that where you use this uint is always a correct place, but in runtime it's just a regular int that is inline. So these functions, they are implemented like also on regular ints. So, and here I need to now remind myself what was the real point of this stuff. So let's look here. Yeah, there is the boxing. So normally the inline classes, they are not boxed. So you just take the, so in reality there's a regular int is traveling in the code at runtime. So, and they're just, I think it's just a bug in the compiler that I found, that when you do this kind of thing, it will not get boxed. So if you do it like this, it will be boxed properly and it will be printed like it should be printed. So let's see. Okay, it's, yeah. So these are warnings. So we get like the correct answer, like this one. But if we do this, then the compiler gets fooled and it doesn't box the x anymore. It just passes it as int to println, and println prints the int. So not the boxed x, which should be converted to unsigned version of it. So yeah, this is because println is a universal function that has all of these versions of it. And if it would be a function taking uint, it would work properly. I think I'm out of time, so thank you for the test run of Java Puzzlers, and Kotlin really so Kotlin really is a cool language. I think I've shown some very cool features to you of the language, and in reality you don't stumble upon these kind of things too often.
So thank you, Anton, so much. A small act of gratitude from our side.
Yeah, so I can use it here in the office.
Yes, exactly. And back to the JetBrains licenses. Here are sheets of paper. Here are also pens. Leave your first name, last name, and after the short break, 10 minutes, we will pick up 3 winners out of this collection of contests, and then other ones we will just abuse in our marketing purposes. And then, yeah, see you in 10 to 15 minutes.
The third talk, we will give a demo to Andrei of pair programming. It won't be long. It will be like 20 minutes or so don't worry.
down to the baseline.
Till I get up, time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways. And on we'll go. And
empty. The only thing I can see is my own silhouette. I'm getting stronger, step by step. The clock is ticking, but there's no time for regrets. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Feel like a dynamite, ready to explode right up in the sky. I need you to listen, I need you to hear, and don't show any fear. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight.
Three different licenses to give away. Guys! Now I would need one volunteer. Girl. So come over here and pick 3 winning tickets. So that nobody is pissed at me, rather you.
And the rule is, if person is not present here, it goes to the next person.
Yeah.
So
just pick one winner from the list here. Okay, can you read out the name?
No.
It says Pavel Sherbakov. Yeah, congratulations. Two more.
Marko
Lagovic. Yeah. And another one.
Mikkel Lukas.
Mikkel Lukas. All right. We have 2 winners, and now we can proceed with pair programming. Please welcome Anton and Andrei on stage.
So I'll give you a brief demo of how it works in Codeborne. How do we do it? Because there are not too many people that we know outside of Codeborne or previous employees of Codeborne who do pair programming. So yeah, it works almost like this, or like this, or even like this. Actually, the analogy of driver and navigator is like the classical analogy in pair programming. So it's often the answer to the question, how can you program at the same time? So usually actually it happens not at the same time, but turn by turn.
We can change roles. At any moment of time, one of programmers is kind of driver, and another is navigator, and they switch roles all the time.
And this is the ideal case. So in the end, we'll show you a small table for advanced pair programming, which kind of other roles can appear in the pair and how to solve them. So this is like the real world picture from our previous office. So in here down below, you have probably seen that we have one computer, 2 screens, 2 keyboards for one computer, and always a pair of people sitting next to each other on the same computer and looking at different screens but seeing the same picture, basically, the same code. So this is for comfort, so we don't need to be too close together. So we can comfortably sit at a distance. That's why we have everyone have their own personal space.
We have special white tables, like this.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah,
2
like
meters.
in the previous office, we had like 2 meter wide tables, and here we also have one continuous table, basically, so we can rearrange the pairs and positions, so it's comfortable. And we have 2 keyboards, so we don't need to throw the keyboard back and forth. So again, for convenience. So another picture of people pair programming, and we don't have any personal computers. So we have our laptops and our phones, but all the workstations, they are shared. So today I can sit here with Andrei, and next day I can sit with Erik on another table, another PC. So basically there is nothing personal about each PC. So I don't put photos of my dog next to the screen and something like that. So this is for environment for work, and then at 5 p.m. we go home, and then we have pictures of our dogs, basically. So and now we'll try to show it.
Try to demonstrate how pair programming actually works.
Like percentage-wise, how often one works independently, or how much of their time one works independently versus in pair with a peer?
Basically, we don't have independent workstations, and the rule of thumb is that all the code that we commit should be written by 2 persons, basically, okay, or reviewed at least like by a second person. So it meaning that sometimes we do work independently. If I am pairing with Andrei on some task or project and he gets sick tomorrow, then most likely I will not get a replacement for 1 day. And
this is a real life picture. As you see, this man is the single, and that woman is single. Probably because the second one is sick
or maybe went for a coffee or something else. So basically, yeah, this works.
But most of the time, as a rule, we do program in pairs.
And actually it's fun. So writing code by yourself is really boring, I would say. After you have pair programmed for many years, you don't want to write code by yourself. That's boring. You don't have anyone to chat to. So you need to put a teddy bear and chat to him. Hey, hello, teddy bear. I feel so lonely, but I still need to write this code. But let's well.
It's basically the same.
Of course, everything is the same. If you have looked at on this floor, we have toilets with only one thing, but on the lower floor we have other toilets specially designed for us. So it's a joke, obviously.
Let's practice. We decided to show pair programming on some real project. It's an open source project which our company develops amongst others, and we decided just to demonstrate to add some funny feature to the Selenite project. So let's start from cloning the project. And
everything's fair, no cheating.
Yeah, let's make it from the scratch. So what we are doing, we are cloning the project, and we are going to add a new feature to the Selenite, a feature named Hello World, just for demonstration.
Yeah, production feature?
It's a way we can say it's a production feature for now, because obviously we cannot show you the code that we're writing for the customers, so we need to have an open source project for the demo. So yeah, let's import the Gradle projects, blah, 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 something like this, and it will download the dependencies. And obviously many people ask us, what if I use IDE and Andrei is really big fan of NetBeans? So how can we program together? So the obvious question is that all the tools should be standardized on a team. Even if it's a team that is not pair programming anyway, you should have exactly the same code style, exactly the same tools, so that you can have the collective code ownership. So let's see if it's already available. Let's look, while maybe it works, let's look a little bit to the Selenide quick start. So if you haven't used the Selenide before, you can watch the video by this gentleman. Yeah, this is basically how do you use it. So it's a
Selenide is a library for writing automated UI tests, browser tests. It has very simple syntax, so you can just open a browser with command open, then find some element by name, by ID, by class name, and so on, and do some actions with these elements. So for example, type some text into the input field or click buttons. That's it. Very simple syntax. And we are going to add a new method here. Instead of setValue, we want to add method hello.
So this is
just to show.
Yeah, our customer decided that he wants to be very polite, and even in the testing framework, we need to be really polite. So we use add the hello methods to Selenide. Contributed to the open source project, and maybe the main maintainer will accept the pull requests eventually. Okay, so we have now the project here.
We do use test-driven development. It means that we need to start from tests.
Yeah, sure. So if I'm not starting the tests, then Andrei would stop me right away. He would tell me, you should not. What if I want to write in Kotlin?
I don't think that this is a good idea, because not because Kotlin has some bad features, but because there is a big.
Because we just saw it doesn't work at this.
Okay. Yeah. But actually, Selenide has a big user base who are used to write in Java, and I guess it's a good idea to maintain it in Java.
Actually, the thing is that when we pick a new project with a pair or with a team, we are free to decide which technology to use, which programming language to use. For example, for a new project, I would use Kotlin, but because we're contributing to an existing project, probably doesn't make sense to introduce a new dependency. So let's write it in plain old Java, unfortunately. So I am starting with with a first test. So standard IDE and stuff. Let's call it hello, and let's test it with Google. What do you think? Google is a perfect site that we can use for abusing. It has so many data centers and stuff, so it will not die if we'll run all our builds with the real Google. So let's, oops, that's the wrong open. So Selenide has its open, let's see. I think it's like this, yeah?
Yeah.
So let's statically import it, blah, blah, blah. And let's use the HTTPS Google.EE. So let's run it. We have already some code. Let's run it and see if it fails. So, I forgot to show you a very important slide. So, because there are some things that how pair programming works, we also try to use test-driven development, of course, because tests first ensure that you have the good test coverage later, and you're you can still maintain your project after a couple of years. So, but to do test-driven development with pair programming, there is a trick called ping-pong programming, which is basically a couple of steps. So, for example, I write the failing test first. So like in TDD, you start with red, then I pass the keyboard. Instead of implementing it myself, I pass the keyboard to my pair, and then he becomes the driver, and then he implements the code, makes the test pass, makes the test green, red, green, like in TDD. And then, only then, we also can refactor it. So it can be either Andrei or me, so depending at what point we pass the keyboard, and then we again, then we pass the keyboard again, and then then Andrei writes a failing test for me, and then I make it pass. So it's like ping pong. So, and I try to more difficult test for Andrei. Andrei tries to write a more difficult test for me. And this is what makes actually this all fun. So, but still, let's run our code. We already have something. So let's see. We'll compile the whole of Serenade. How long does it compile?
It's not really big.
It's not really big, like a couple of classes. Small toy project.
Yes.
We just, first version, we extracted it from one of our projects, one of our first projects in Codeborne. So we wrote it for ourselves. So you probably have seen that Google has flashed, and then it was closed automatically because we don't do anything else besides opening. So we have a green test. That's wrong. I need to have a failing test for Andrei. So let's do it. So the Selenade, we need to find an element. So Andrei, maybe know how do I find the?
This is element with name Q.
So you have made so many presentations about Serenade. So Andrei knows that this is
Google so many times.
Name equals Q is the query string in Google. So
and put dot.
Yeah.
You will see all available methods in Selenade that actually we have. Set value, shoot a value, and so on.
Yeah, but
click.
We don't want to use them. So we
want to add other methods.
We want to be polite, and we want to have a really useful method in the framework called hello. So it doesn't compile. So we use idea to add it, and we go back, and now we have code, and then let's run it. See if I have a failing test for Andrei. So, and we open Google, and it fails.
A failing test.
So the reason of failure is that unknown Serenade method. Hello, what the hell?
This is exactly what we need. We have a red test, and now it's my turn. We switch roles. Now I'm driver, and Anton is navigator. So
I would click on a stack trace, I think. I think stack trace will provide us the hint where to go next.
Yeah, exactly. This place says that we don't have a method named hello. And as I see here, we have some big map of different methods. And we can add another method.
Well, that's cool. I think we can copy one of these rows very easily.
Why not? Copy paste is a great thing.
Just change it to hello, and it should work.
Actually, probably we already have green test.
Think so?
If yes, we can switch keyboards again.
Yeah,
yes,
green.
We have green test, but next step is I have to write a red test for Anton this time. So I'm going.
So I was hoping that he will implement everything already, but he was smarter than me. So
it's actually not funny. It's really important because by writing the next test, failing test, I'm going to provide the fact that this functionality is actually tested. It actually works. I need to.
Yeah, for now we just have method hello that does we don't know what. We need to check what it does.
I need to add some check here to be sure that it did something. Selenade has method should have, and for I guess we need to have value.
It's good field. That my peer already knows all the API, so I don't have to know anything.
Something like that?
Yeah, that's
At
cool.
this moment, we are...
Import the static, so it's shorter.
I'm looking for keys on your keyboard.
Nice.
Okay. And I guess I did a test for you.
So, and do I have a failing test?
Exactly.
Yes, I do. So it's empty, nothing there. Oh my God, so now I need to be smart. So I need to actually go and implement the stuff. So I'm going to comments, I'm going here, and I will think that this get search criteria is not exactly right. So I'll create a new comment. Let's put it somewhere, don't care. right now. So yeah, implement methods. It's good to use a statically typed method, the language. So sorry for you Ruby developers.
JavaScript coders.
And now we have the command, and of course, if I just run it like this, then the command is still there, but it still doesn't work. So
yeah.
I think unfortunately I need to do something here. So I need to actually write hello world here. I hope this is the way you typed it. Mm-hmm. So let's now run it. So. And yeah, green. Cool. So now I can make it hard for Andrei. So I know that I have seen Serenade framework somewhere, and I know that you can chain methods so that you don't need to repeat this. So I'm refactoring now. So let's refactor it. And as we have the green test, and I'm pretty sure that I'm not breaking anything. Yeah, and I think that I am. Yeah. So the problem with the hello method that Andrei has generated, it doesn't return the correct type. So let's go here. Let's see, we are inside of a class called Selenate element. Yeah, we can see it. A lot of methods here. So let's go back down and just return it so we can chain it nicely. So yeah, let's
now
see.
This test compiles.
Now it compiles. Now I run it. Let's see if Andrei can now do the rest of the job.
Yes.
So and yeah, we have a failing test.
Okay,
so
thank you. Again, we're switching roles again.
I can now go grab a coffee, or I can help him to actually implement it. We have null pointer exception.
Yeah,
I already seen it.
Cannot.
Yeah, you're just.
Okay.
Just. Yes,
okay.
the null pointer.
We got
here.
null pointer here because I know because this.
Use control, yeah.
Because this returns null. But I believe I know that probably return proxy will help. How can I know that it helps? I can start test again.
Yeah.
We will see.
So that was too easy, I think.
Yeah, it was too easy. Question?
If you run only the test at hand over and over, how do you then deal with regression? If you just change the code that you didn't own at this point, well, actually, well,
usually we feel that if you're changing the code still, it's not a black box testing, so you know what should you run. So sometimes you rerun the methods. In most cases, you rerun the tests, all tests for the class. And but in some cases, you know, if you have changed several classes, maybe you need to rerun tests for the whole package or all tests. Depends. So usually, if you make a mistake, then the continuous integration server will catch you and beat you for that anyway. So not a big deal.
But whoever makes mistake then fixes it.
Sure. But also, if I'm making the mistake, I have my partner to stop me, and vice versa. So this is the point of pair programming. So what do we have?
So I have implemented your feature. I made your test green, and now I need to add more tests or more checks to make this test right again. And I guess that this hello method is not actually what our client, what our customer asks.
Yeah, actually, I recall when we were sitting with the customer on the meeting, he told us that we need to greet not only the world, but also some other things.
Sure. Actually, it's exactly written in Jira requirements.
Not Jira, please.
Okay, actually, I guess that our customer does want to greet anything, and I will do it. So, hello, whatever.
It still doesn't compile, so I'm not accepting not compiling code.
Sure, it doesn't compile, so I will add an argument. Now it compiles, and I will run the whole test this time.
Yeah. The whole class. Maybe we'll add new ones later, so it will be easy to rerun it.
As you see, UI tests are actually quite slow. They need to run a new browser every time to check if this browser is up to date and so on. That's why, as a rule, we actually write unit tests, many of unit tests, and this time we write UI tests just for demonstration.
Let me clean this up after you, before I continue. I see there are a lot of unused imports, so I will clean it up, and now we can continue working. So I need to implement it. It said hello world again, so I need to again go into the implementation and start changing the actual code. Oh my god, that's so boring to change the actual code. So I guess we get some, what is the signature here? We get some arguments here. Actually, we need to always also get rid of this, but before that, I still need to get the green test. So, because otherwise I don't know if I broke it again. Yeah, in like the example thing, or if we had more time, I would write DEVCLUB here, and that would be the easiest way to pass the test, and then Andrei would write another test. But here, because we don't have much time, we do it like this. Actually, in reality, we often do it like this, but still we need to write more tests to verify that that is the correct implementation. So
I believe it's clear now.
Should be. If you have spelled DEVCLUB twice correctly, yeah, you did.
So, well, it seems that we actually have implemented the feature. Now it's demo time.
Yeah, so let's demo it to our customer. Where is our customer? He's coming.
So Tit, you asked us to add another hello method to Selenite.
Yeah.
So this is how it looks like.
Yeah, this is how it looks like. Like you see, hello method, we pass DEVCLUB. We now can check that it works correctly. So let's Tit, especially for you. Let's make it like this. Hello Tit. And let's check that there is no DEVCLUB hard-coded there. So let's write it Tit. And let's now run it and demonstrate that it's all implemented.
So
demo time and hello Tit, hello DEVCLUB. Works.
Good.
Are you satisfied?
Yeah, but how about with the next input, you say goodbye?
That's probably a good idea. We haven't thought about that before. Yeah, really.
It's kind of late as well.
Really, yeah. Let's do that. Let's do the goodbye part as well. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. See you next time. So.
Okay. Well, this is what actually happens often when we show a new functionality to the customer. He comes with new ideas, which are sometimes really stupid, or sometimes smart. It depends. Sometimes we need to implement it.
Actually, before I start implementing it, we have green tests, so it's time to refactor. Let's do a small refactoring, small cleanup. Let's introduce the setup method and move this duplication here, at least a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. And now we can write a new test for the new requirement that Tit, so goodbye. So let's implement it like that. So if we run hello twice, again, for example, Tit, we say the last value stays goodbye. By the way, we don't need to test the first value again because we have a separate test for it. So we say hello twice and it says goodbye. So let's run all the tests. I really hope that my assumption is that the only one of them fails. This is really important also while pair programming to voice your assumptions, so that you know if you're like moving in the correct direction. And yeah, hello Tit did not change into goodbye Tit. So you have the honor of implementing the new feature.
We again switch roles, and I'm going to satisfy this test. So like this, that I need to. In this method, I need to check if this element already contains.
Let me teach you to close this thing. You know, to close this thing down so that you can see more. You can write. You can press Alt 4 twice, and now
cool. Alt 4.
Very quickly. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I guess we need to check if this element already has some value. I guess I can use this one. And if it starts with hello. Let me think what I need to do.
Let's just replace hello with goodbye. I think that would be cool implementation.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. Let's set a new value.
Yeah, previous value, replace. Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah.
Sure.
Hello.
And put goodbye instead of hello. Like
and
this one.
Don't forget the else, otherwise we will overwrite the stuff.
All right.
So.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah, great. So let's run it.
What do you think?
I think it can work. Definitely can work. Yeah, it works.
Cool. Okay, but obviously it's not good implementation, right?
Yeah, you know, now it's my turn, and I now start thinking.
It's my turn. I need to write a red test.
Yeah,
now.
sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were like thinking it's probably not, or it will probably not work in all the cases. Let's try to break it.
This is a moment where test-driven development is really good. We are forced to think, what is the problem? What is the case that is not supported right now? We need to think about another test which would fail.
Well, somebody's calling. Oh, sure. Yeah, it showed it. Yeah.
It's sometimes
yes. Let's do it up, yeah. Yes. We're working on your implementation, no? Yeah.
Something like that, or example for customers or for one, and he need to intercept and go away. At some moment he will get back. Okay, and I need to think.
Yeah, I assure you it will all work tomorrow. No problem.
So what will be the case which will fail? I guess we need to write something like. Oh,
so you know, Tit called, but
well,
never mind.
What happens?
Yeah, he just asked, is it ready already or not? So I told him it will be ready tomorrow.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And
so,
meanwhile, while we talked, I created another test. I hope it will be green. I hope it will be red now.
Okay, so no interruption for you. Yes.
What shall happen actually? I mean, if one of the member of the teams leaves.
Yeah, the second one continues with the flow. So actually he doesn't lose the flow despite me being interrupted. And then I come and I have time to adjust, and he's talking to me, so I know where he is. So this is the thing. And the same happens if somebody goes and grabs a coffee or like whatever.
Like, yeah, this is one of the biggest points of paired programming, that we never lose focus. One of us can interrupt, but we pause, almost never lose focus, except if we pause. So we actually have failing test.
You have failing
the
test.
The actual value is good by it, but expected value is.
Yeah.
We
have screwed it up. So let's fix the implementation.
Let me show. Good by alcohol should be. This is expected value.
We have screwed it up. So let's go.
Switch roles. I am navigator.
So I think this like hacky implementation wasn't good after all. So let's use a dump implementation here instead. Goodbye. And see, this one should pass, I guess. It's not the most beautiful code, but still, if we get it working, we can refactor it later. Because the test will show us if it works.
Actually, it is beautiful.
Yeah, it works. now I can refactor it a little bit, so maybe...
You can make it shorter.
Yeah, maybe the cooler thing would be to extract this variable and call it like greeting, and actually not keep it as boolean but string, and see if it starts with hello, then we use goodbye, otherwise we use hello. And now we can have only one call here. So So we write like a trivial refactoring. Yeah. And now we have our test to verify that we haven't broken anything. So now we are running all our tests, 3 of them, and they were 4 of them. If they all work, then our refactoring was successful. Yeah, great success. So actually,
I guess we kind of did our work.
Yeah.
We can commit now.
Yeah. Now, actually, we could have committed it earlier. So basically, that was it. That was the basic demonstration of how it works, and we really do it every day, like this. It really is fun. It really produces better code, and most of our customers who actually first, if they learn that we do pair programming, they kind of hesitating. They say, you're probably twice as slow as the others. But then they see how it works. They are much more happier about that. So there are some companies in Estonia who, after like finishing the contract with us, they were looking for other companies who can also do pair programming for them, so that they can have the same level of quality and everything. By the way, if you're interested in trying this out in reality, we are hiring, so that's kind of obvious. But
I believe you can just come to our office for one day and just try it, pair programming in real life.
Doesn't it require that the pair is at the approximately same level?
Good question. This is the next slide.
So now we come here to the advanced pair programming. And this is actually a small reminder that was put together by Erik after we read one interesting blog post. And it's actually, the thing is that it's not always easy to do it, if the levels are different. And the best scenario, and there are actually different kinds of roles that can happen in a pair. And the best case is that you have the driver and co-pilot or navigator, and you're both more or less of the same level. You're all supporting each other, constantly switching, and you're like flowing. So in real life, it happens then pair programming is also really good, for example, to take new people on board to the project, for example, or teach more junior developers, or except for the knowledge exchange that we can have with Andrei, as a same level developers. We can still teach each other tips or tricks all the time, but when I'm mentoring a junior, this is a different thing. And here there are some of the, where did it disappear? Maybe they did something? No?
It seems so, yeah. You can
okay, I can just say. So one of the style is called the backseat driver. So the backseat driver is that when, for example, the level is not the same, then, for example, I'm mentoring Andrei. So the best case is not that I write everything and Andrei watches and learns the stuff. The best case is that I sit to the back of the car and I let him to navigate. And I'm a co-pilot, so I'm teaching him, but I'm not. I'm programming, but using his hands basically. This is the much better to teach a newcomer in the project or at all. And then the rally here is the best case. Then both are experienced already in the project and overall. And then goes the tour, for example. The tour is that, is when one guy is touring, showing the tour of the code to the other guy. So this style of pair programming, it can happen. It happens pretty often when, for example, Andrei wants me to show, or he shows me something new somewhere, or brings me up to date with the project if I was on vacation or something. So this is called the tour. So he shows me, I watch it. So if tour happens too long, then it's already a bad situation, because in the tour I'm passive, so I'm not remembering as much as I could, and most likely If it continues for too long, then we need to switch to the backseat driver situation. So Andrei goes to the backseat and controls my hands verbally. So, and then the worst thing that can happen after the tour is, for example, the disconnected pair. A disconnected pair is that when one is giving the tour and is driving and the navigator fell asleep or is not following anymore. So it also can happen, and even with good and experienced developers, like distraction, like whatever, sleepiness, like or whatever. And in this case also, like the role of the navigator or the one who has disconnected is to actually say stop and try to actually fix the situation. So these are like the examples. I'm sure there are more, but these are like the main ones. And here the important outcome from here is that if you feel that you're in a wrong style of the pair programming, you need to think or discuss with your partner how to get back on track to the correct pair programming.
Have you considered what's the optimal amount of hours for pair programming per day? You are using 100% for pair programming, but maybe the optimal time is somewhere in 60%. Like, did you consider if make some tests?
Depends. We don't know how to measure it. So usually it also depends on different people, I think. So some people who like get tired more easily or something, they can maybe agree with the pair or something.
The human brain functions a little bit different when you sit alone and when you sit in pair. Maybe if you see the same code in two different variants, then it will be more beneficial for the quality.
Maybe. Or we have tried different versions, and sometimes actually when somebody is sick or on vacation, you still get to work alone, and as you have breaks, you have the lunch time, and you actually sometimes you really want to like go deeper with some topic, and you agree with your peer. Okay, you continue. I go and Google it more, so that I will gather some more information that we can use later together. So and it happens quite a lot actually. Quite a lot of the time, especially when the peer stumbles on something that none of the both knows the solution right away. So we start Googling very often separately, and then whoever finds the solution first actually announces it, then we look at it, and then maybe we Google more, or maybe we accept it and go further. So actually it's not like you're all the time sitting and writing code. I think
I believe a good practice is to experiment as you wish, Google as you wish, but to write the final version of production code together.
Yeah, sometimes you can try something out, like agree. And in Codeborne we also have these R&D days, so all people can actually one day, like every 2 weeks, we can have one day that when we do anything by ourselves.
Research and development.
Yeah, research and development, like learn something or develop some toy project or whatever, and then next day come back into the pair and maybe have some new knowledge and stuff. So.
Question?
One question, maybe it's a management question, maybe I missed something. If you have a new task, you have a few of developers with the same skill, how will you decide who will be working?
What if we...
You have a task, yeah? And you have a queue of developers.
Mm-hmm.
Who have the same level.
Whom do we put to the project?
Yes.
So we take many things into consideration. We take the availability of people, like we actually, I think during our 8 years of existence, we probably, maybe only a couple of times we had some time when some of the developers don't have any assignments. So it's really a rare case. So what we do, we see, like if we have a new project, we see who gets available soon, whom we can assign. So usually it's that way. We also take into consideration the experience with different kinds of technologies or the domains. And we also take into account who hasn't been working with whom yet, or maybe like whom do we want to put together. So sometimes we think that maybe we want somebody to mentor another person, so we put them together, or we like vice versa. We see that we need to have really strong pair, so we put like the best guys on some of the more difficult things. Or sometimes we have this daily stand-up meeting, we just shout and say, hey, who wants to, we have a new project starting, who wants to join it? So it's a lot of different options.
You spoke a lot about that you speak a lot with each other.
Sure.
But you have one long desk. Don't you bother the next pair to you? I would be really annoyed if somebody chatted away next to me all the time.
This is a really common question. Yeah, people often ask it.
And it happens that we get bored. Sometimes you hear something really interesting from the next peer and you turn to them and say, hey, maybe you can do it like this, or maybe there is like somebody like they are discussing some anecdote.
The big distinction here is if you're working alone, then I understand your emotion is that if there are other people chatting around you, then it will affect you. If you're also working in a pair, then you will automatically focus to the voice of your pair, basically, and you will ignore the rest. This almost comes like automatically. And what I've noticed is sometimes when I end up working alone, like my pair is sick or something, then I will notice other pairs talking. But when I'm working with my own pair, then I don't notice them at all. So it sometimes happens that if someone needs to work alone for a short period of time, then they put on a pair of like earphones or something. But when you're working in a pair, then the rest of the pairs, the chatter doesn't affect you. Of course, there is like a common understanding that we keep the voices relatively low so that we don't start shouting. But nevertheless, it's about whether you have to concentrate on your own or whether you work together with someone.
Yeah, that's true. I have also noticed that, yeah. And sometimes it does happen that the noise level in the office rises, and everyone tries to talk over the others, and at that time somebody will shout, psst, and then it fades away.
So it sometimes happens, but it's not really often. It's not a real problem. My answer. Yeah.
Maybe like a bit unrelated question about testing. Do you always or kind of rather usually approach test first, or there are any cases when you just first focus on the implementation and then on the calculation?
As a rule, we always write tests first. There are some exceptions, but as rules.
As we are also like normal human beings, sometimes we forget. That's why we have a peer to remind. And of course it happens then there is some like research kind of task at hand, and nobody knows even how to write a test because you don't know what you're doing yet. So you need to investigate first, and then you're not writing test first. But still it's good then the code, like there's some sample code that you have produced during research, is best if you delete it and then write the test first and the real codes again.
Just a side question. Should it be something that should be already taught in the school?
Sure.
Actually,
I have tried it. I'm teaching at the Technical University, and I have tried it, but especially the student is still young, out of the middle school from somewhere, and he's just learning the features of the language. It doesn't matter if it's C#, the Java, whatever.
Still, but in the university, what I have noticed, I also have taught a lot that students very often, they try quite normally, they sit together and start exploring something in pairs. I think in university you don't even have to sell it to them. They already know that it's a better way of doing things in many cases.
Yeah, pair programming, yeah, that comes automatically, somewhat. Yeah. There are limits because they have to go home, or one of them goes there and starts to work in the middle of the night, and then it falls down. But here in the classroom, yeah, they often pair up, or even more than two people at a time. But test-driven development especially.
Sure, it should be, it must be.
For test-driven, if you teach it that way, then they can probably understand it. But yeah, if they're still learning the language, still you can actually show them the basics. Up to you that you need to like enforce it to them. Because
yeah,
otherwise,
I can beat them,
but otherwise, you know, they are always still using some println or something all the time. So they are testing their code, but they don't know how to fixate these tests in code so that it will not break later.
Automate
you just need to show them the other way around. So you are not writing the print, but you are writing that assert equals this output is like this. It's almost the same. That is about like when we are pair programming, I told you that it's important to voice your assumptions. It's the same with test-driven development. So if students are pairing, they are voicing their assumption that I think that this piece of code produces this kind of result, so let's check it. Of course, they need to know syntax first, a little bit. There was a question behind you a couple of times already.
Pair programming is so effective. Why so little people are doing this for companies?
People are conservative. You know, it's one thing, and the second thing that at first impression of everyone is that yeah, it's going to be twice as expensive. But in reality is completely different, but you need to try it out to start believing it. Nobody believes it until they actually see it.
Actually, there is one more point. Like, not actually everyone is suitable for pair programming, let's be honest. We are IT people, sometimes are really introverted, and you want to do it yourself. Sometimes you don't trust people, sometimes you don't love them, but like,
this is partly true and partly I think it's legend. It's again the thing that people made themselves to believe. Yeah, we are only 30 because we are not trying to like grow too fast, because otherwise we can lose our culture that we have built already.
Actually, I believe that we have a lot of introverts behind us, between us, and who actually do use pair programming. It's not a problem.
The truth is, if you don't believe in it, then it doesn't work for you, and vice versa. That's true for if you come with attitude that it doesn't work, then it doesn't work for you. So you must want to make it work for you. It's definitely, it's a, like anything, it's a set of compromises. You have to agree with someone. So that agree to work on the same thing, to discuss things. It's just that you have, most of us who work alone have got used to working in a different way. So do you want to change, do you want to do that or not? Because definitely there are a lot of good developers who get relatively good results working alone. And so it's like a leap of faith whether you want to do it, but it's definitely, if you go with the belief that it doesn't work for you, then it won't work for you. It's not like a magic bullet there.
Let me rephrase your question. If sport is so effective for keeping you healthy, why are so few people doing sport? Absolutely the same.
But what's your experience? How long does it take to change from like this lone star developer to like a pair programmer? What's your experience?
I don't think it's a change. You know, it's like you just start working like this, and you can be one day you can be lone star, and then second day you can be a pair programmer. It's like I don't think that there is like a long transition period. At least it wasn't for me.
Yeah, there is no transition period.
In your regular practices, how often do you rearrange parts? How often do you shuffle your teams?
Good question. We try to switch pairs as often as possible. Sometimes we switch, in some projects we switch pairs like every day, in other projects and every week. So they decide depending on the project, on the people and so on. But we strive to switch often. Yes. Okay. It's really good for like knowledge exchange. Different people can exchange their knowledge.
And another question, I'm kind of buying into this one. So how do you, for example, if you have on your team people with different level of competence, and for example, how do you then motivate less experienced programmers
through pair programming to keep up, and how do you not make their life at work a nightmare?
Good question. Actually, it's a question that I often hear. How can work together experienced programmers and like junior programmers who knows nothing? And actually, pair programming is a very good way to teach the junior programmer. He can we can apply one of these techniques, kind of backseat driver. Junior programmers start doing all the things, and the navigator will speak to him what to do, and junior will teach really quickly any technology.
Okay. I think another answer is respect. And since you are working on this task together, then the best way to get the most effective result is to work on this together. And one of the things that when you're working alone that you don't have to do is to think about others. So yes, this is one extra thing that you need to do in working in pairs. And definitely we haven't seen that, but if we would see someone treating their pair badly, then that would be an immediate no for being in our team. Basically, you have to respect the others. It is not a competition behind the table. It is a teamwork of going forward together. So if someone there are definite situations when people get into a heated discussion about some solution, but that's a different thing when people of relatively equal level don't agree on something, but then they sort it out usually themselves still, and they go on but as a rule, definitely you have to respect the other, not depending on how junior or how senior you are. You are in this together and you have to work it out.
Yeah, this one, I understand. My question was rather, for example, I am a junior engineer in the pair, and then I have my pair. I play in a backseat driver role, and then they instruct me, kind of explain their idea about how to solve it, which I didn't have one of my own, and then I just follow the instructions, and then maybe at some point I feel kind of unimportant, or I feel, well...
I think when you're actually doing that, you feel that you are learning, I think. You are not feeling that you're unimportant. You're feeling that you are learning. Next time you can do it yourself. And actually, some of our employees actually came to us completely outside of the IT. So we had this school of programming happening where we have 4 or 5 people who actually came to us who had completely no experience with programming before joining us. And it also worked.
So you also onboarded these people through pair programming?
Yeah, sure. Initially they were pair programming with among themselves, so while they are learning, and then sometime we started more mentoring them, and then it was already pairing on a real projects with some experienced developers.
Okay.
Yes.
Basically it seems that, sorry.
Yeah.
What I think or what I feel from the viewpoint of the business is that this is a methodology how to get more out of the people. If I'm working alone, I'm working for 8 hours, but out of those 8 hours, let's say 3 hours is really productive, the rest of the 5 hours is just fun feeling. If I'm paired up with somebody, then we get 6 hours of productive work altogether. But now when I'm in pair, my partner is constantly beating me. And at the end of the day, he gets 5 hours of him, and the sum put together is bigger than the 2 guys sitting alone. Yeah, that's why you get the better results.
Yeah, it's
but at the end of the day, the program is that I go home at 5 o'clock, I haven't programmed for 3 hours and watched 5 hours of cat pictures. Now I have fucking hell programmed for 6 hours over the day, and now I'm going home, I'm dead.
Of course, how else do you watch cat pictures if somebody else is watching?
there is great satisfaction in actually getting things done.
Yeah, for sure.
This is the reward. There is actually you get things working, and this is both through the test driven that you see that this actually works, and the feedback from the test, which is another story in which you can do alone. But then, like keeping this pace that you can actually go through the, let's say, 8-hour workday with actually producing stuff and then go home. Yes, it takes energy from you. And what I've heard with new people when they've joined us, especially like the first days and first weeks, they go home exhausted, and when all the learning but that goes away at some point. You get used to that. It becomes routine. And then, but the satisfaction of getting things done, actually getting results and presenting them to the business customer who is satisfied then, that is actually a really good reward.
True. And actually, I believe when you are watching Keks pictures, you also are tired because you are afraid.
Wasted your time.
You are afraid, or because you don't want that other can see it. You don't want the customer to see that you did nothing, and so on. So you are not satisfied.
And of course, sometimes with a break, we go and play this like football and stuff, table football or whatever. So it's not as bad as it sounds.
You also do it in pairs, right?
Yeah, we do it actually. 4. The football is usually 4 people. It's even better than the pair.
There was one more question.
I have 2 questions. First is, how long do you stay in flow? You said you don't break flow if you kind of take a flow or so. So how long can you stay in flow? Do you stay in the flow for, let's say, 3 hours in a row, then take a lunch break, and then 3 hours more?
Yeah, I think it's like, it can be like up to 3 hours at a time. Yeah, because if it's more than usually, otherwise there will be some other break or lunch, yeah, as you said.
It depends. The main point is that people can decide when they want to make a break. They probably after 1 hour.
I'm just asking, how long do you usually do?
Yeah, I think 3 hours sounds like reasonable for me. Like.
Second question is similar to his theory. If you pair program, or if you program alone, when can you? I assume you've done both, and you're also used to pair programming. At the end of 8 hours, when do you get more exhausted? Can you do 12 hours of pair programming? Can you do 12 hours of single programming?
Actually, I even know the answer. I have participated in Garage, this thing, and I know that with pair programming we could do it longer than without pair programming. I think if I'm doing it alone, I will get tired more easily. So I will maybe start thinking about I should be tired by this time, so maybe I need to feel sleepy, and I start to feel sleepy and these kind of things. So pair programming, I feel it will keep you active and energetic for longer.
Besides adrenaline and coffee and stuff like that, they work well for a long time. Let's say for a week.
Non-stop?
I'm not looking non-stop, but let's say 5 days.
Yeah, if you work every day, then you go home, you relax, you watch your YouTube, your walk, or whatever.
Can you work 12 hours a day? Can you work alone better, or can you work in pair better? In Friday?
I think that in Codeborne nobody works 12 hours a day. That's the first thing that we agreed. Yeah, the thing is that it's in extreme programming that we are following. Is there actually a very important thing which is called sustainable pace?
But still, I'm asking about I'm trying to quantize which one does you more. Programming or single programming.
I think
if you program in Garage 48, then you have adrenaline, then you have kind of feedback, and kind of pushes you up.
I have an answer. I believe that you are more tired when you work alone, and The reason is that it's a well-known fact that people are tired not because they had to type a lot of, not because they need to do many factories, but people are tired because they need to make decisions. These decisions, this is actually the thing that we are tired of every day. And when we are in pair, we can discuss all the decisions. It's much more easy to make decisions.
Yeah, less stressful, because you know you have discussed it. It's not only your decision that is...
The biggest point of pair programming is not that you cannot see cats. It's not that you cannot read Facebook and so on and so on. The biggest point is that you always have somebody to discuss with. Your ideas, your things, your decisions, you always have. This is the biggest point, and it's really useful.
Have you also tried programming with 3 people at a time?
Yes.
Sometimes, when we have really big problem.
Yes, either a really big problem or just an interesting problem. It can happen that, yeah. Oh, there was in the back.
How long have you been doing this, the pair programming?
How long?
Yeah.
We've been doing it since day one in Codeborne for 8 years, and we've been doing it before that, I think, for at least 5 years in Swedbank.
And a follow-up question, so if you were given the same environment, the same pay at the end of the day, would you prefer pair programming or solo?
Or?
Solo. Like
Our solo.
Working alone, yes.
Obviously, we do prefer pair programming. As I told you, actually, it's not fun when you are writing code alone. You feel lonely. Like after you pair it a lot, you feel the need to discuss, and you have nobody to discuss, and it actually feels bad.
Just to put things into perspective, so if you ask Anton, given the same like pay and everything, Codeborne is what Anton or let's say me think of an ideal environment for programmers to create things at. So this is not that someone else put it this way and we have to follow it. We believe that this is the best way of producing good software, so that's why we do it. It's not that someone else makes us do it. This is why this is our own stuff.
So basically, the wrong people to ask from.
But so for me, the best, and for the novice programmer, the best, there could be different things.
It could be. I mean, we are not keeping anyone prisoner as far as I know. So, I mean, anyone who sees that it doesn't fit them is free to leave. I mean, we have agreed that we work in this way. If there are other companies that work the other way, it's their choice, but I haven't seen people much complaining about this. So, I mean, it's most of the people say that it actually helps them. It's exactly this what Andrei said, the discussion thing, that they can discuss through the solution and arrive to a better choice.
So let it be the last question. Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, this pair, they are organized randomly, because if you're willing to decide the people by themselves, maybe there is some preference later going, like, I prefer to work with this person more than without. I like to work with him a couple more in pair. So, do you have such kind of issues?
Do we have that people prefer to work with one person and not the other? Do you understand correctly?
Yeah, do you have such kind of situations when one person saying, like, I like to work in pair, not always this guy?
Sure, we know that some people like have more buddies than the others. So of course, obviously, they want to work with somebody they already know better. But when we switch people, after like 3 days, they all again are already buddies and they are going to lunch together and stuff. So
you have this approach when you especially randomizing the pairs.
Yeah, more or less randomizing.
So we're actually tracking the pairs who haven't worked much together yet, and we try to put them together more. So if we have a chance. We don't enforce. It's like we don't have a prison or something. So very often we also ask people, do they want it, do they like it, or whatever. We like, yeah. If somebody doesn't work out, and it did happen maybe a couple of times during 8 years, then we can easily switch people.
From my experience, people typically want to learn new things, including want to try new people.
Thank you. And if they don't, they are not right people. Yeah. All right, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much. Next one, October 30. Leaf 99. Leaf 99. See you there. And this is it for tonight. Thank you, Codeborne, again. Thank you.